Disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley from Rhapsody of the Seas. On March 21st, 1998, the Bradley family would head from their home in Virginia to Curacao. This was a big deal for Amy. The 23-year-old woman had just graduated from Longwood University, and the trip was a gift to her for her graduation. Her 21-year-old brother also attended, and they would all celebrate before she started her new computer consulting job. Amy had also adopted a dog from a local shelter, so things were just really starting to happen for her. On March 23, 1998, Amy went with her younger brother Brad to a party at the ship's nightclub that night. They were drinking and dancing with the band, which was Blue Orchid. One member of this band was named Alistair Douglas, and he was known by the nickname of Yellow. He had taken a shine to Amy, and he was dancing with her a lot of the night. A professional photographer and videographer would capture the two dancing together and take photos of them. This is one of those things where they employ a photographer, they take pictures, they lay them out, and they try to get you to buy them. The man would later say that he did have those photos out and no one purchased them, but they disappeared. Some of the video was released by the FBI of the two dancing together. The link to that video can be found in the description below. Alistair Douglas would say he left at 1 a.m. that night. One other item of note from that night, it's noted that a waiter paid a lot of undue attention to Amy. He would send her notes and try to engage in conversation. He also tried to get her to leave the boat in order to go ashore and go to the bar Carlos and Charlie's. Amy, however, declined to go along with the waiter. After an evening of dancing and partying, Brad got tired and he said he headed back to his room at about 3:15 a.m. The ship's door system would indicate he entered the cabin at 3:35. It would then indicate that Amy came in 5 minutes after. The siblings would then proceed to sit on the balcony and just chat for a while. But then Brad got tired and he decided to go in and go to bed. Ron Bradley, Amy's father, would wake up somewhere between 5:15 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. And Rod would notice that his daughter Amy was sitting in a lounge chair, still out on that deck. Although his view of her was restricted to the waist down, but he could tell that it was Amy. He would then fall back asleep and he would wake up at 6 a.m. again. But this time, Amy was missing and so were her cigarettes and her lighter. It's assumed that she went up to the deck to smoke, although this was unusual because Amy's typical behavior was never to go anywhere without saying where she was going, although of course she may not have wanted to wake up her parents. After checking in the area, her father then reported her missing immediately. He begged them to make a shipwide announcement to keep the 2,000 passengers on the ship until they were able to find her. The crew refused, saying it was too early to do this. The reason it was a concern was that the ship was about to reach shore, and they were all set to disembark almost immediately. At 7:30 a.m., the majority of the passengers had disembarked from the ship. The only announcement was for Amy Bradley to go to the purser's desk. And even that announcement didn't happen right away. Most of the people were gone before the announcement ever happened. That first page for Amy would be noted at 7:50 a.m. The ship was not searched at all until 12:15 p.m. to 1 p.m. 45 minutes for that large of a ship is interesting, but it's easy to see why it was done so fast later. While the ship was prioritizing not letting anyone know that somebody was missing, two women later who found out that they were on board when the girl went missing came forward to say that they did see her. They reported that they saw Amy on the elevator that morning holding cigarettes and a lighter. Unfortunately, that wasn't relayed because nobody knew there was a problem. Amy's brother Brad would report that the bass player known as Yellow approached him to say that he was sorry about what happened to Amy. The family was suspicious, of course, because nobody knew other than security and the Bradleys that Amy was missing. The boat was purposely keeping it quiet. So then, of course, the question is, how did Yellow know? The Coast Guard would launch a 4-day search, which would conclude on March 27, 1998. The Coast Guard would then make an assessment that Amy had either taken her own life or just accidentally fallen overboard. However, Amy Bradley was a really strong swimmer. There's no evidence of an accident or foul play. Officials would later claim they combed through all 10 decks, all 999 rooms, and found nothing, saying they concluded she had to have jumped or fallen. It would later be disclosed this wasn't even true. Only a slight search was done. In fact, by the time they even bothered to start searching, most of the crew and passengers were gone, and they didn't go room to room and check at all. They would also tell the Bradleys they were not able to post a photo of Amy to see if anyone had seen her. So the Bradleys were out of options. They went ahead and got off the boat to search for Amy in Curacao. Unfortunately, they were unable to find any trace of her at all. So they would then hop on a plane, fly to the next stop, and then reboard the cruise ship. While those in charge of the cruise ship would tell the Bradleys that they searched every room, they would later admit to the FBI that they only searched public bathrooms and common areas. They looked nowhere else for her. A little bit later, 2 Canadian tourists would report to seeing Amy, although that report wasn't made until they were back in Canada where they lived. They would say they were staying on a beach known as Porto Marie in Curacao. They were not only able to positively identify Amy and her tattoos, but they also positively identified Alistair Douglas. This is the man named Yellow who had been dancing with her that night. It's believed that he was hired on to be her handler. It's not clear exactly when he was fired from the cruise ship, but it seems to be while they didn't search for her, they were pretty quick to fire him, which is also kind of suspicious. And then Royal Caribbean Cruises sent lawyers to the Canadian tourists to discuss seeing them on the beach. It was lawyers that met with the divers at their home, and it was clear, once the lawyers arrived, that the goal was to discredit them and what they saw. The divers, however, maintained their story that they saw Amy walking with 2 men on the beach, and that she was also trying to get their attention, which of course they didn't understand at the time, although the reasons for that seem pretty clear now. A federal grand jury would eventually happen for this case, and the FBI would call the man that came forward to testify to the federal grand jury, and he reported to that jury that Amy and 2 men were walking toward him on the beach as he and his dive partner were collecting their equipment. Amy started moving directly toward him. The man, identified later as Alistair Douglas, would quickly step between Amy and Carmichael. He would report that the man gave Carmichael a menacing look. Shortly after this, Carmichael and his dive partner would decide to go into the beach bar that was there. Once he entered, he was able to see Amy and the 2 men again. He described Amy's tattoos, and he described seeing her watch. The watch was described as being similar to the one shown here. Amy's boyfriend had given her this watch, and she indeed had it with her on that day that she had disappeared. She had been wearing it. The information regarding the watch was never released to the media either. He described it without having any notice that she had even had a watch. So it looks pretty clear that he probably did see Amy. In addition to seeing her with Yellow, he would then describe the third person as a European type with a ponytail. He would then state he was 100% positive he saw Amy that day at the close of his testimony. It's not even the only testimony tying Alistair to Amy. At the same federal grand jury, a female witness would testify she saw Amy with Alistair Douglas on the top deck of Rhapsody of the Seas minutes before she disappeared. She said that Amy had a camera with her, and it's believed that she went to the upper deck to take photographs of the Williamstead Canal. The woman would also say that when she saw Amy, she wasn't wearing shoes. And this is actually also consistent with the facts. All of Amy's shoes were still inside the cabin. The witness testified that she saw Alistair Douglas give Amy a drink that contained dark liquid. The same person saw Alistair Douglas leaving the upper deck alone, and she saw him exit in the glass elevator. Despite the eyewitness accounts, it was concluded there wasn't enough direct evidence to charge Alistair Douglas. It is surmised, however, that Amy was probably removed from the Rhapsody of the Seas by cargo doors, and that she was probably put inside some sort of container or laundry cart. They've stated there's a service elevator from the upper deck where Amy was last seen, going straight down into the cargo area. A few clues appeared over the years and they seem pretty credible. However, there's no way to verify whether or not that they're real. But the possibly less credible, a 1998 cab driver came forward to say that a woman who looked like Amy came forward with an urgent request to use his phone right around the time that the boat docked. It's not clear if she was able to use one. He would say he remembered her tattoos. There are some concerns about the fact that she couldn't have worn shoes at the time. And he couldn't remember if she did or didn't have shoes, although not having them would probably stand out. Also, she would have been most certainly drugged and removed if she was removed. So it's pretty unlikely she would be able to jump into a cab at that time. During the fall of 1999, it came out that Amy had been found. The Bradley family received an email from Frank Jones Jr. He would state to the Bradleys that he was a Navy SEAL, and he would say that he has men who are also Navy SEALs that work with him. He said that because he found her, they would set up surveillance points in Colombia where she'd been spotted. He went on to claim that they had observed her in a dark green SUV driven by a captor with long blonde hair, saying it was a dangerous situation and they tried to save her, but they were forced to leave after a week, saying they were fired upon by the men guarding her. Jones would go on to describe what she looked like, describe her tattoos, and say that he had spoken to her. And he used as further proof a lullaby that he said Amy told him that her mother once sang to her. And he had photos. They were photos of Amy on a beach with a blonde-haired man. Jones would then go on to say that if he was given $210,000, a rescue operation could be launched to save Amy. His accomplice, a woman named Marguerite, would call Iva Bradley, Amy's mother, and claim that she was watching Amy at a neighborhood Pizza Hut. Once the pictures were provided to the family, they were finally able to breathe again. This was the first time they really had hope. Iva Bradley later gave an interview saying, "When I got the pictures, I knew Amy was okay, and it was just a matter of time." As a result, the Bradleys would send Frank Jones $24,000 from their own pockets, as well as $190,000 from a fund set up for Amy's search. Amy's father drained his retirement account in order to provide the other $24,000 in order to get his daughter back. Took every penny he had, but it would be worth it. All that mattered was getting Amy back home. In fact, Ron Bradley's employer even provided a private jet to sit on standby to go get Amy as soon as they could. They would find themselves sitting in a hotel room, just waiting. They sat in that hotel for a week, waiting for a call that never came. Turns out it was just a heartless scam. Jones did have men watching a house, but an ex-Army man named Buckholz, who wasn't even a part of it, who actually thought he was going to save somebody, put together that it was a lie based on what he was observing. And he also overheard Jones speak to the Bradleys, relaying information that he knew positively wasn't true. He would let them know the house that they were observing had a normal family inside. It turns out it was just a game of extortion. A man who previously was Army Special Forces, named John O'Sank, would later admit he was working with Jones. He told the authorities he wore a blonde wig and he posed as the kidnapper. He would admit that they set up photos by finding a woman who looked like Amy, who they even applied fake tattoos to. They paid her to pose on a Pensacola, Florida beach. Tim Buckholz, the man who realized that it was a scam, called Iva Bradley 17 months later, telling her Frank Jones was officially being arrested. And he made sure that Iva was able to stand on those courthouse steps when they brought in the scammer. So she was standing there, watching him as he was sentenced to prison for fraud. But unfortunately, there's no punishment could ever reverse the pain or the trauma or the anguish that they felt because of what was done. They'd already suffered so much, all for profit. Jones only got 5 years in prison. His sentence was reduced because he paid the Bradleys the money back. It hardly seems fair, but at least they got their money back. Years later, a man would come forward to state that in 1999, he was a member of the U.S. Navy, and he went into a brothel where he saw a woman who recognized him as being American. Chief Petty Officer William Hefner would explain that he left the U.S. Chandler and went into the Stellaris Hotel in Willemstad. The Stellaris was located across the street from where cruise ships would dock. The Stellaris Hotel was owned by a businessman named John Dariani. The circle shown shows where it was located. However, it's not there anymore. But at the time, it was directly across the street from the old dock for cruise ships. When the currently used pier is full, to this day, cruise ships and other ships still go around to this old dock. It's alleged that this location was being run by Dariani as a brothel, and for that reason, it was known to the Navy, and the Navy personnel put down an order that they were absolutely forbidden from going there. When William Hefner came forward, he would explain to the authorities that Amy realized he was an American, and she told him she was desperate for help. She gave her full name as Amy Bradley, saying she was an American citizen, and that she was being held against her will. The petty officer, however, chose to say nothing, saying he was a married man who had been forbidden from going there. He didn't want to get in trouble, and for that reason he never told anyone. He would later say he feared for his career and marriage, and so he kept his mouth shut, and he didn't tell anyone of her plea until years later. He then saw her photo in People magazine in July of 2001, saying it was then that he realized exactly who he saw, and he did go to the police. By the time the authorities investigated, the brothel had been burned down. He passed several polygraph tests administered by the FBI, and he did participate in the federal grand jury that did take place in Virginia. His story has long been believed to be pretty credible. He also apologized to Ivor Bradley. It looks like John Dariani was later arrested, but for nothing to do with the hotel. It appears the issue was arson. John Dariani, for his part, has long tried to portray himself as a valid businessman, but it's alleged that he has many shady dealings. There was another sighting on April 18, 2003, this time in the U.S. It's believed that Amy was seen at Pier 33, known as Fisherman's Wharf, in San Francisco, California. 2 artist sketches were completed from this sighting by an FBI artist from Quantico, Virginia. The witness was able to provide additional information about Amy's handlers, saying they were watching a musician on the pier near the ticket area for Alcatraz. At one point, one of her handlers gave her foreign coins, which she dropped in the musician's case. The witnesses eventually identified the woman with these 2 men as Amy Bradley. The claim is that when Amy's handlers realized that Amy had been recognized, they grabbed her and they ran. As the handlers dragged her away, the witness would further state that she looked over her shoulder and looked pleadingly at them as she was taken away. At one point, she stumbled and fell to the ground. There was a theory that she might not be trafficked anymore and that she was instead being forced to be a mule for them, bringing illegal things into the U.S. But of course, no one knows. There's no proof of any of this. The FBI took this as a credible sighting, but they would also state that there were no cruise ships in the area on that day. The handlers were described as wearing matching Hawaiian shirts and cheap sunglasses. According to the witnesses, the FBI sketches are like photographs and that they're very accurate. The sketches were on the FBI website for about 10 years. More sightings were on the horizon in 2005. In early 2005, a woman named Judy Moore was in a Bridgetown, Barbados department store bathroom. She would state that she saw Amy Bradley walk into the bathroom and 3 men were waiting outside for her. She could hear the men threatening her. She was positive it was Amy Bradley, and she describes Amy's demeanor as being distraught. Amy gave her first name to Judy, and she said that she's from Virginia, which, of course, Amy is. However, that was the limit of their exchange. The men outside came in and forced Amy to leave. Unlike a lot of the sightings, Judy reported this immediately to the authorities, and at that time a composite sketch was made of the men and the woman. And because she was alarmed at what was going on, the police were involved, and there were 2 more sightings of Amy that day. She was seen walking on the sidewalk a block away from Broad Street, with 4 men completely surrounding her. The sketches you see here are the ones from that sighting. As alarming as all of these sightings have been, it would actually get worse and take a darker turn. In November of 2005, Amy's parents appeared on Dr. Phil. They would release photographs that had been sent to the Bradleys, that appear to show Amy on a website advertising for female escorts at a location on Margarita Island, Venezuela. It's not clear when the photos were posted. They were emailed to the FBI and Amy's parents. And this came from an organization that works to track women and children who are being trafficked. The resort that it was from was known as Affordable Adult Vacations, and that location was verified through the photographs of things seen in the background. So they know that's where she was. The forensic artist was able to locate a known defect on Amy's nose that can be spotted in the photographs they received. Or at least this was their assessment. The same was said for the upper portion of her ear. It was decided that most likely it was Amy in the photograph. The last sighting of Amy took place in January of 2007. And that's another disturbing rabbit hole that I ended up falling into while I was doing research. Alfred Cotton and 3 additional men were seen having dinner at the Mill restaurant in Aruba. They were with a woman that's believed to be Amy Bradley. What's interesting about this too, in addition to it being a new sighting, is that Alfred Cotton looks very much like the sketch made in San Francisco. I'm not sure what the specifics were as to how Amy's identification happened, but it appears that the FBI took this as a credible lead. While that recreation does look very much like Alfred Cotton, I have to be clear that he's never been charged in relation to Amy at all. If it was in fact Cotton in the recreation and at the restaurant in Aruba, it opens up the question as to how he was involved in her situation, and for how long. We do know that Alfred Cotton and his wife, Jennifer Lee Cotton, were residing in Florida, and they would later be charged by the New York City DA for selling women through a business known as Tropical Adult Vacation. Now keep in mind, this is not the same outfit that the pictures showed up from, although it's a similar setup. He was involved with Tropical Adult Vacation from 2011 to 2015. The DA had traced the profits and they were going directly to the Cottons. They charged him with selling people like menu items to U.S. citizens. It appears the charge originated in New York because that is where the person who paid resides. According to the DA, they claimed to be providing the women with room and board. It's also believed that many of these women were not willing participants in what was going on. And over those years that they operated, they set up hundreds of trips to the Dominican Republic, advertising on Backpage to solicit customers. When they were in operation, they sent Paco, the man shown on the screen now, to pick up customers from the airport. And when the Cottons' home was raided, they found lots of money in Dominican currency, as well as 55 pounds of silver and gold bars. Their excuse was that the services they provided to U.S. citizens was legal in the Dominican Republic. DA Vance pointed out that many of these women were known to be employed against their will. The Cottons would then argue that if they were going to be charged, it should be in Florida. It's unclear exactly how that case was resolved. Cotton and his wife, however, are no strangers to being arrested. So we need to back up to 2007 in hopes of providing some kind of clarity. If Cotton was spotted with her in her last sighting then, it's not a stretch to suggest he was in this long before he got caught. The FBI drawings of what appears to be Alfred Cotton was done from the sighting in 2003, 4 years before she was spotted in Aruba. The possible photos of Amy that were sent to her family were advertising services of the same nature that the Cottons would then be arrested for. So while there's only ties to them and this venture from 2011 to 2015, it's not a huge stretch to think that they could be involved in something similar from years before. In this case, the photos were taken for sales through Affordable Adult Location, which was located just a few blocks away from Tropical Adult Vacations. As you can see here, it clearly takes place at the Astoria Hotel in Boca Chica, as the railings are very identifiable. Those photographs showed up in 2005, but they could have been taken a year or more earlier. It appears Michael Hooper and Charles Blasco were the Affordable Adult Vacation managers at the time. Whether they're at all depicted in the recreations that have been done, it's hard to say. So far, there's definitely been no positive ID. Alistair Douglas, who was also known as Yellow, has never been charged with anything and apparently claimed he has no idea what happened to Amy. It appears he was given a polygraph and he cleared it early on. It's noted that after the police decided to clear him, more evidence came forward to prove that the things he'd said weren't quite accurate. The police did say that they obtained video evidence of him dancing later on, and it's indicated that the video itself directly contradicts statements that Yellow gave in his polygraph. As I pointed out before in other cases, polygraphs aren't overly accurate either. It's also very reliant on the experience of the person giving the test, and even then it's not always correct. That said, Alistair Douglas did pass the polygraph. There are some claims still that she either jumped or fell, although again it's pointed out she was a strong swimmer, and of course there have been many sightings. It's also worth noting that she had a lot going on that she had set up for when she came home. She had just graduated with a degree in physical education and had a new job. There's no indication she wanted to hurt herself. She had arranged to pick up her new dog from the shelter right after she returned home. Also, she purchased 15 rolls of film to take on the trip. She planned to make a collage when she got back. This, of course, makes the sighting of her on the deck right before she disappeared, holding a camera, make more sense too. You should note, though, that there's no confirmation that her camera was found in her room, or at least that I could find, or that it was missing. Because the police seem to accept that sighting as reliable, my guess is that she did have the camera with her. I'd love to hear what you guys think. This is one of those cases that I always go back and look at long before I ever thought of even doing anything on YouTube. I personally think she's alive, or she was alive, but I would like to know what you guys think. The details in the sightings are a lot different than you usually see with cases. A jawbone eventually washed ashore in Aruba in 2010, which led authorities to believe it belonged to Natalie Holloway. I remember reading once that DNA testing ruled her out, but I don't know. According to what I'm finding here, they say that no DNA testing was ever done on the bones, which is actually pretty disturbing if it could be either of those people or somebody else. Even if it's unrelated, it just feels like that person should be identified, but it's not up to me. There's no explanation or reasoning that I could find behind choosing not to run the DNA on the jawbone. Although, of course, the motivation could be much like that of the cruise ship for not searching. Sometimes you don't want to know, so that people that go there don't worry that something bad might happen. The Bradleys sued Royal Caribbean twice, alleging that she had been abducted, hidden, and forcibly removed. Both lawsuits were thrown out of a Florida court, with the judge stating that the Bradleys perpetrated a fraud on the court by concealing evidence that proves Amy Bradley was witnessed living freely in Curacao. Whatever that proof is, I'm not quite sure. It's actually kind of interesting the way the statements by Royal Caribbean sort of pivot. She was living freely, she took her own life, or fell overboard. But regardless of all of this, the judge ruled in the cruise line's favor, and it appears the Bradleys were fined nearly $200,000. I can't confirm that the fine was upheld, so I'm not really sure what happened. But it appears that they've alleged that she's alive and well, and authorities spent 1,300 hours working the case. And these hours were apparently the reason for the fine. The cruise line would later make a statement that they fully cooperated with authorities, saying, "We're sorry, despite all these efforts to assist the Bradley family, they've apparently decided to direct their grief at the company by filing a lawsuit seeking financial damages." Amy Lynn Bradley was declared deceased on March 24, 2010, 12 years after she disappeared. Over the years, various rewards have been listed, including the FBI offering up to $25,000 and the Bradley family offering $50,000, with a request for her location. It appears there's a reward of up to $250,000 for her safe return. I'm always kind of hesitant to put the rewards on here because sometimes they're a limited time. So I want to explain that I don't know for sure if any of these have expired. It looks like there's current rewards. I did most of the investigation for this case through FBI reports, some press articles, but so much of it came from the website amybradleyismissing.com, I'll provide the link in the description. This is an amazing site, and it has even more than I've told you here. It's very detailed and must have been put up by somebody who knows the Bradleys, or one of the Bradleys. Please, if anyone has any information, call the number on the screen. My heart goes out to Amy and her family who loves her. Can't imagine what this has done to them for the last 25 years. Amy Bradley has been missing for 25 years. If she's still alive today, she'd be 48.
As always, thank you so much for watching. The current goal for the channel is 20,000 subscribers. Please consider subscribing and hitting the bell so you don't miss new episodes. Thank you so much to everybody commenting. Even with just an emoji, it really has made a big difference. Without it, there isn't a channel, so thank you guys so much. Take care of yourselves and each other.